Nicole, and we're going to do a little bit of weekend extra with Pastor Ryan. We're in week 2 of the most interesting man in the world. It's not you.
It's not.
It's Jesus. It's Jesus.
It's always the right answer.
It always is the right answer.
Jesus.
But I just loved the whole thing, especially the dialogue and imagining being there with Jesus and his mom and the whole woman thing. I've never really quite understood that till you explained it. Because I always see the woman thing as like the 21st century woman, get me a beer.
Right.
Yeah. And sitting there with my adult son, we were chuckling pretty good.
You're like, see, you can't talk to me like that anymore.
Yes. Hey, Trav, they're out of wine. Fix it. They're out of wine. But I think what was so great for me about that, what I love, and what I think the series is doing for me actually is reminding me about the day in and day out life of Jesus, and that God would come from heaven, live a life that looks like ours, like go to a wedding.
Right.
Go to the things that he went to, like just like us.
Do normal stuff.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I love that.
So I love that part, and it was good. But what I think I also thought about, like that was the fun part, but I think the part that challenged my thinking, and I wanted to ask you about it, is, at the end it says, the disciples believed.
Right.
And I'm wondering, I'm sure the servants were pretty much like, wow, like wouldn't you like to interview them? Know what they said?
Totally. I would love that.
But I think too, like, what are we in 21st century America when those miracles aren't being seen live anymore?
Yep.
We read about them, but we can't see them. And sometimes, like when I'm even sharing my faith with people, I get that a lot. So I just thought I'd ask you about how do we deal with that we're not seeing those things live at this point in time.
Right, because it's definitely a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people who are watching Jesus do these things, they have a unique window in some ways into revelation, like into what God's doing. They're actually seeing God with skin on. Now, what's really cool is at the end of the book of John, so John tells us all this stuff that Jesus did, and the reader, he knows that the readers who are kind of interacting with, like we would, all these different stories, like they didn't get to see Jesus, right? So those people who are reading John are like us. Right? Which is kind of cool. And then he says at the end of John, I can't remember, I think it's in 20, he basically says, like, you are blessed if you have believed but haven't seen, right? Some version of that. I'm sure that I'm botching that, but that's the idea, is like if you have seen and believe, like that's a good thing. But for those who haven't seen, who didn't get to be there and watch the water turn into wine, like you are even more blessed because you had faith without even having to see it. And so it's pretty fascinating. Now, when it comes to like helping other people understand that, I think pointing them to what God is already doing and what he's doing in the world and our lives, and I think those things are huge, just to point to God's activity, because the water into wine thing is a miraculous thing. Sure, absolutely. My changed life is just as miraculous. In fact, it's more miraculous, right? Because I've been made alive from the dead.
And it's your story.
It's my story, and I get to tell it, And so for me to say, man, I was changed, is in many ways them knowing me, the people who knew me before and after Jesus would look at me and say, that guy's different. Just like that water is different. It's wine now. They look at Ryan and say, that guy is different. And that's part of what I would have loved to share more of, in the message this weekend, but didn't get to, is just too much, is what John is doing is you're going through the book of John, he's kind of laying out this fact that Jesus is going to bring a new kind of everything, right? So in John chapter 1, as you're reading through it and studying it, and I hope a bunch of us are reading through the book, as you read through John 1, he's talking about John the Baptist, right? So a different guy, not the same guy that wrote the book. John the Baptist is baptizing all these people, and he talks about a different baptism, right? A kind of a better one, baptism by the Spirit. And so this is going to be like a new thing that Jesus is going to bring. If you jump to chapter 3, he talks about a different kind of birth, that like everybody has to be born by water, which everybody gets freaked out about. Like, what does that mean? Really, it just means physical birth. We have to be born physically. And then he would say, but if you want to enter the kingdom of God, you have to be reborn. You have to have a second birth, right? So you have to have this new change in your life that I'm going to bring, right? And in the middle of those two stories, so first baptism, now a better baptism, a new birth, and now right? Kind of a first birth and then kind of a new birth. And in the middle of that is this water to wine story. And that whole thing is helping us see this theme all throughout John of everything that we consider normal. Jesus is bringing like the new and improved and revamped version because Jesus is changing everything. He is bringing life. And this is the guy you want to believe in, right? So we can't get into all of that in the message there, but that's the heart of what John's doing is he's trying to lay that all out for us so that we can see, man, this Jesus guy is the real deal, and look what he did all along the way. So I want to know that as a Christ follower and see some of that in John, maybe even in a fresh way. And then when I'm talking to people along the way that can't see, just like we can't see Jesus working physically in our earth, I want to point them to what God is doing, and say, how do we explain that? How do you explain that guy that was on drugs and now is sober and loves his family? How do you have that kind of transformation? And I can look people in the eye and say, I tried to change a million different ways and couldn't. The only change that is effective for me at the deepest levels, the parts I really wanted to be changed by, is Jesus. That's all I got.
Well, I think it was so great that we happen to have baptisms at
fun.
this service because that is somebody talking about their new birth.
That's it.
And their new life and their own story of change and transformation. It was perfection.
Yeah.
Almost like you planned it.
Hey, man, I think the Lord set it all up. I love that. But it's new life, and that's what it's all about. So I love that, seeing Jesus through fresh eyes and seeing that when Jesus came, we were just talking about this a little bit before, like we see the end result of we know that Jesus is God and right, he rose from the dead, he's with the Father today. Like if I'm a Christ follower, I know how all the story plays out. For the people going through it, like they had no idea what was going on,
Uh-huh.
And I got to remember that as people see my changed life, they don't know what's going on. As they see God working in them today, they don't know what's going on. So the faith decision to believe in Jesus, whether people saw him physically or not, it's really always the same. Do I believe in what God is doing? And do I kind of have what Jesus would say, eyes to see it?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So I think that's part of it. We could say a lot more, of course, but I think it's a good start.
Well, I'm excited to keep going with the series. We're going to be doing this a majority of the summer, right?
Yep.
And Jeff encouraged us to read the book of John 3 times. So we're keep doing that. And it's great because we started doing that at our house.
That's awesome.
So like when you were doing this sermon series today, with some of this good discussion we had at our kitchen table, which was really affirming.
I love that.
Like, oh my gosh, he's at a wedding. He's having a good time. They're having a party.
Yeah.
Just like we have a party. That's what he did. That's what his life was like.
That is awesome.
So, well, we look forward to upcoming the rest of the series, and we'll see you next week. And this is Nicole and Ryan signing off for the Weekend Extra.
See you guys.